Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bloomberg UK, a special focus on the biggest challenges facing the British government, the economy, financial services and markets. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, UK inflation has tumbled to the lowest level in 2 years. Prices rose 4.6% in the year to October, down sharply from 6.7% in the previous month. Now, the figures actually allowed the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to declare victory in his goal of cutting inflation in half in the year. Now, however, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, cautions that there's still more work to do. Now, joining us now for an exclusive conversation, Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee member Megan Greene. Megan, thank you for joining us. I have a lot of questions, actually, to try and understand your thoughts. Now, we had some data that came out saying, look, inflation is coming down. When you look at wage growth, that's also coming down. Does it change your view on how inflation will behave?
The recent data is good news. Inflation came down pretty significantly, and that's both headline and core. But the biggest contributor was really energy, so not a huge surprise, but good news for sure. The labor market data was also pretty positive. Wage growth decelerated a little bit. It's still incredibly high, though, and so I would put all of this in the category of good news, but I think there are still reasons to worry about the persistence of inflation in the UK.
Would you still vote the same way you did last time?
So the vote isn't for a little while. We'll get a whole bunch of indicators on the activity side, so looking at how the economy is holding up, and I'll need to see that before I really know exactly how I'm going to vote. But just so you have a sense of kind of what I'm looking at, in the inflation data in particular, the headline figure came down. The core CPI figure came down. But if you look at services inflation, which is the best place to look if you're looking for signs of persistence, you can strip out kind of the energy-intensive part of services inflation, and the rest is kind of flatlining. So it's good news that all of this is coming down. The fact that that isn't coming down reliably and sustainably is a little bit of a worry that we might still be facing persistence. And, of course, if you look at the wage growth, it's very high regardless of which metric you're really looking at. And so if we have an economy with fairly low productivity growth and really high wage growth, it's going to be hard to hit the target. We will, but that's a worry about persistence as well.
So, what overall do you worry about the most, actually? Is it that there's something with inflation? I know we've had a whole number of analogies about, mountaintop or how everything does. What's the biggest risk of a mistake right now?
So I think that my biggest worry is that there is persistence of inflation. Of course, that has to be balanced. Inflation is our main target, but that has to be balanced with indicators of activity, and we are seeing that the economy is slowing. So the goal is to bring inflation to our target over the medium term without causing too much of a slowing of the economy. That's the needle that we're trying to thread.
So what's your current take on the policy stance? Is it pretty much there, or actually is it off?
We're in restrictive territory, and that's good. I think we need to be in restrictive territory. The question is, are we restrictive enough? And that will depend on the data. The question is also, how long are we going to be restrictive? And I think that there are reasons to think that the economy may be structurally a little bit different, that suggest that actually we might need to stay restrictive for longer.
And this is something that markets haven't really quite clocked onto. Is that fair?
So I think markets globally haven't really clocked onto this, and so there is aggressive pricing for cuts in the U.S., for example. Yeah. You're also seeing it in the Eurozone. I think the notion that the long-run neutral rate might be a bit higher and, the natural rate of unemployment might be a bit higher isn't something everyone's grappling with, but it just suggests that the world's going to look a little bit different once the dust all settles than it did before the pandemic, and it suggests we might need to be restrictive for longer.
Megan, so how quickly could you see cuts when you look at your timeline of when you're expecting the first cuts? Markets are pricing in, I think, July of next year.
Yeah, Fran, I'm not thinking about cuts at the moment. I don't think that's where we are.
When you look at some of the big unknowns, is basically what the politicians do to also grow this economy. Is there a template in your mind of how you would do it?
Yeah, so productivity growth heals all economic wounds. So I think that would be every economist's top choice for how to expand the economy. If we had greater productivity growth, we'd have higher potential growth. That would give us more room to grow without it being inflationary. You could have wage growth, so people's standards of living could improve without it being inflationary. That's the top choice. That requires reforming the supply side of the economy, technological innovation. We've had some of that, and so it's possible that we might end up seeing some productivity growth come through. We're not really seeing it yet, but that would be my top choice.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess there's always a problem with timeline. It would take much longer, actually, than what we have at the moment.
So if you started now, it would. Some of the technological innovation that we've seen, some of the investment in green technologies, for example, also in defense globally, that could feed through into productivity growth. It tends to take a while, and there are measurement issues. So, we're hoping to see it. We're just not seeing it yet.
How are you enjoying the Bank of England? I mean, this is like the first time we had you on TV. It's a very different way and process of working compared to the U.S.
It's very different. It's been fantastic. The staff is incredibly supportive. The UK economy has its own idiosyncrasies, which are challenging and really fascinating, so I'm enjoying it a lot.
I mean, there's so much talk about the neutral rate. I mean, it's so difficult, actually, to find that, right? How do you, again, where do you think we'll be on neutral?
Yeah, so as you point out, a point forecast on a neutral rate is sort of pointless. It's not the kind of thing you can observe in real time. You can only sort of guess, and so I can't give you an estimate for exactly where the neutral rate is. I don't think it would be helpful. I do think that the neutral rate is really important as a theory for central bankers, even more so than in practice, actually. But I do think we all need to know where we sense the real rate is going, and so their direction is important. And I know there have been measurements of the real rate. John Williams, for example, in the U.S. has produced a bunch. There are a bunch of different methodologies. But just in terms of narrative, I think there are reasons to consider that the real rate may have risen. If you think that the real rate has been so low in part because of this global glut of savings, there are reasons to think that with all the investment, the green transition, defense spending, we might be whittling that global glut of savings down a little bit. That could push the neutral rate up. So if the neutral rate is higher, as I've mentioned, I think that means we might just need to be restrictive for longer.
But would it help with market pricing, or just more on how economists actually look at where they need to be?
So I think it might help with market pricing insofar as central banks can suggest what direction they think the neutral rate is going in. Markets might take a signal from that. They might not. I think it is a highly uncertain thing to estimate. And so I'm not sure how much it would help with market pricing, but the concept that it might be a bit higher, the economy might look a bit different now than it did before the pandemic, that should inform market pricing.
All right, Megan, thank you so much. Bank of England MPC member Megan Greene stays with us. You should too. This is Bloomberg. Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now let's go back to our exclusive interview with the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee member Megan Greene. Megan, thank you so much, first of all, for sticking around with us. Now, we're talking a little bit about your view on, of course, the economy, where interest rates should go, and the neutral rate. Talk to me about how difficult it is for a central bank to actually, from where inflation is now, or even 4%, to get it down to your target.
So I think that going from 10% inflation to 5% inflation was always going to be easier than going from 5 to 2%. In the UK, this is particularly the case, largely because energy disinflation has now mostly come through. And so it will really be down to goods and services inflation that will need to come down. That's going to be really tough. So the dramatic drop we saw in October is not really a surprise to anyone, given the energy price cap. We won't be able to rely on that going forward. And so I think it will be a slightly tougher slog, but we expect to get to our inflation target in the medium term.
So when you look at tightening financial conditions, how much of that will do the work?
Financial conditions are incredibly important, and we're looking at them. They're tighter than they have been for a couple of years. Insofar as financial conditions loosen, then that undermines what any central bank in a rate hiking cycle is trying to do. So it's certainly an input into what we're looking at.
But does the jobless rate, for example, then need to be at 5.5%, even 6%, to really get inflation down?
Unemployment will probably tick up from where it is right now. The labor market has been loosening. We've seen the number of vacancies come down. Unemployment's ticked up not as much as you might have expected if you're using previous cycles to go by. I think our forecast has unemployment going just above 5% by the end of the forecast period. Our goal is to bring inflation down to 2% in the medium term without causing unemployment to increase more than necessary. That's a key priority. But we will need to see the labor market loosen more to see incredibly high wage growth come down. And I will highlight there are a bunch of different metrics for wage growth. They're all really high.
Is it possible to actually try and safeguard, jobs whilst at the same time getting the kind of slowdown that pushes down inflation?
It's possible. We're seeing signs of it here. We're seeing signs of it in the U.S. as well. The ideas that will whittle down vacancies without causing actual layoffs. That's the needle we're trying to thread, and that's the goal. We'll see how it goes, but there are signs of the labor market's weakening without a significant uptick in unemployment. Actually, it's remarkably low given where we are in the cycle. And so it will tick up from here. Will it need to tick up dramatically? Hopefully not.
Megan, what's your take on pound right now?
So I think that the pound, relative to what, I guess, is my question. And so this is also an input into what we're looking at primarily through financial conditions, or what I'm looking at primarily through financial conditions. And so, the terms of trade are really important for a small open economy that feeds into import prices, which also feeds into inflation. So certainly an input into what I'm looking at. It's not everything, but it's part of it.
What's the hardest communication job for a central bank right now, like the Bank of England? Is it talking to the markets to make sure that it's priced right, or is it really talking also to the real economy?
I think the challenge is to do both, honestly. I think that the markets have shown significant pushback against the messages that all major central banks have been offering over the past year and a half in this rate hiking cycle. And so part of it is trying to transmit to the markets exactly how we're thinking about things, and that's what I'm trying to do here today. Part of it also, though, is talking to regular people who have felt this cost of living crisis pretty keenly, have felt this terms of trade shock keenly, so that they can understand exactly what we're trying to do while safeguarding jobs and growth.
When you look at black swan events, I mean, these are the impossible thing to predict. How do you view the next possible black swan event?
If I knew, it wouldn't be a black swan event. But in terms of what worries me, I'd say the top of my list right now is around the energy markets, because there's very little that we can do as a central bank to really mitigate against an energy price shock. And I say that particularly in light of what's happening in the Middle East, which so far actually hasn't caused significant moves in energy costs, but it's not guaranteed that they won't. And so, another energy price shock could cause inflation expectations to become a bit more, a bit de-anchored. That's every central bank's worst nightmare. So that's a worry of mine.
Yeah, and of course we don't know what kind of shock, but could it be just something that the bank looks through because it's momentarily, or it's just impossible to know?
It's hard to know. I will say we've been above our inflation target for a while now, and I think the persistence of inflation is important too. The longer you're above the target, the more it gets embedded into inflation expectations. So we're talking about a pure hypothetical. It's impossible to know, but it is something that I would think about in terms of how to respond to another supply shock.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. Bank of England MPC member Megan Greene. Now be sure also to subscribe to Bloomberg's In the City podcast that I host alongside David Merritt on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Thursday. Coming up, it's been a very busy week in British politics, I'll say. As we've been discussing, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hit one of his key 5 pledges on inflation, another on immigration has been ruled unlawful. So we'll discuss that next. And this is Bloomberg. Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, staying in the UK, Rishi Sunak is battling to save his plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Prime Minister is said to be in a frantic bid to stave off a right-wing rebellion after the Supreme Court ruled the government's migration policy was unlawful. Now, Sunak says he's working on a Rwanda treaty and is prepared to change the law. Meanwhile, David Cameron's surprise return to cabinet as Foreign Secretary is provoking criticism due to the former Premier's warm relationship with China. Now, for more on all of this, our UK government reporter Joe Mays joins us with Bloomberg's Adam Blenford. So thank you both for joining us. Joe, does Sunak have a plan beyond Rwanda?
Well, he says he does, and that's this emergency legislation that he wants to pass to say that Rwanda is a safe country and therefore flights can happen and to take asylum seekers there. But there are big doubts over whether this plan B will actually work. There's doubts over whether just simply saying that Rwanda is safe, will that be enough? Does that insulate you from challenge at an international level? Perhaps not. And also there's the basic problem of how long it will take Parliament to pass such legislation. We have, the House of Lords would likely oppose it. So Sunak's hope of having flights going to Rwanda, by the spring seems, quite unlikely at this stage. And he's trying to, like you say, stave off that rebellion from the right of his party. But it's all looking pretty ropey.
Yeah, and Adam, I think we broke the news together actually on the pulse a couple of days ago. So what's been your take so far? How could the right-wing rebellion also impact Sunak? Is it a real threat?
It is a threat. It's 1 year out from an election, or a little bit more than that. The Conservative Party could really do without another bout of sort of internal bloodletting. There's already been whispers and sort of threatens. We've had at least one public letter to go in calling for him to step down, and some reports of other MPs ready to do that, even if they don't have the numbers, which the Prime Minister has probably calculated that they think those opponents don't. It's never good to see your party kind of infighting in public at a time when you're trying to project a unified front. So that side of it is not optically brilliant for the Prime Minister, but we'll have to see whether the impact can be something that actually damages him.
Joe, do you think the impact could be longer lasting than we think this week?
Not sending asylum seekers to Rwanda on planes. He is going to be facing criticism from the right of his party saying, why aren't you just going ahead with it? Why don't we just defy these international agreements? Why don't we just leave the ECHR, leave the UN Refugee Convention if necessary? He'll be constantly facing that demand to just do something, and that's already happening. And as long as things aren't happening, that pressure will continue.
So, Joe, what do we know about how David Cameron will run foreign policy? He's in Kyiv today for his first trip abroad. Do we know what he's trying to achieve? Is it messaging? Is it actually just optics? And what does he do next?
Yeah, I think it's optics. It's having that elder statesman figure in the role, allowing Rishi Sunak to focus on domestic politics, you would say, ahead of an election, having that trusted figure there to represent Britain on the world stage. He has those warm relations with world leaders that he built up when he was Prime Minister. He's a respected figure internationally. And as you mentioned in the introduction, there are some questions about things like his ties with China, things like the work he did with Megan Greene still. And, we're expecting there could be transparency declarations that might come, which could cast, further light on those connections, which might be problematic for David Cameron. But for the time being, Rishi Sunak clearly thinks that he's more of an asset to have than not.
So, Joe, overall, what does the Prime Minister want the relationship between the UK and China to be? We were also just looking at images, of course, of Presidents Biden and Xi meeting in San Francisco.
Yeah, so the mood music recently has been to increase warmer relations with China, while there is that still very sceptical wing of the Conservative Party, which sees China as a security threat and so on. But perhaps growing those commercial ties, perhaps doing more trade and so on. And indeed, David Cameron has been linked to those China ventures in the past. He has had, when he was Prime Minister, he talked about the golden era with China. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a thawing in relations between the UK and China after Cameron's appointment, and that would be in line with what Rishi Sunak's government's been doing recently.
Adam, I'm sure after the pretty tumultuous week in UK politics, Rishi Sunak is expecting or hoping for a quieter week next week. What's on your radar?
Next week will be that David Cameron certainly and Sunak will be looking to see some stability in the Middle East. It's obviously, apart from China and Ukraine, where Cameron's gone for the first time, the issue of the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas is taking up a lot of international kind of bandwidth. And there was obviously debate in the Commons last night that saw a little bit of embarrassment for Sunak's opposite number, Keir Starmer. So the international focus on what happens there is going to stay very much in the front line for the new Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, and Joe, what can you tell us about this Labour rebellion? Is it a big, is this like, should it be a real concern for Keir Starmer?
Yeah, it was quite a moment for Starmer. I think his line was consistently, this is about leadership, and what I will do if I became Prime Minister is, stick to my position, and that's what he effectively showed there. And I don't think it's an existential thing for Starmer at all. I think that this was an issue where people were critical of effectively the actions of the Israeli government. They're not necessarily having a go at like Starmer himself and what the Labour Party is doing. So, yeah, it wasn't as existential, but it showed that there is appetite for rebellion on the Labour benches, and that could become a relevant factor in the future if they were to be in government, and that's something that Starmer might have to deal with, if he's Prime Minister in the future.
Yeah, to both of you, actually. But, Joe, let's start with you first. Does Rishi Sunak think David Cameron is an asset as we get into the election? So, again, is he using for policy, or is it because he's, at a popular figure with certain Conservative Party members?
Yeah, I think David Cameron brings a certain vibe, effectively, which Sunak sees as valuable. And that is one of projecting a kind of moderate conservatism that was effectively popular enough to win the Conservatives' elections in 2010, hung Parliament in 2010, but winning a general election in 2015 and appealing to that kind of more southern, liberal, centrist voter, which the Tories are in danger of losing at the next election to the Liberal Democrats. So having someone like David Cameron there probably shores up that vote quite nicely. But David Cameron has always been more popular than his party, and that is still the case. So, yes, I think Sunak sees him as that electoral asset, essentially. And again, as we mentioned, elder statesman figure, bringing credibility to his administration. I think that's the vibe he brings, which Sunak values.
Thank you both for joining us, Joe Mays and Adam Blenford. Now, coming up, of course, first, another reminder to subscribe to our podcast, In the City, and then we'll have plenty more on UK politics, on the UK economy, and we'll talk about Bank of England rates expectations. This is Bloomberg.